Any other questions?
Yeah, so I just wanted to confirm, you are low cutting a lot of the other stuff that's not the kick drum, basically.
Yeah.
Okay.
There will be low cuts throughout that. I mean, not everything. I mean, like I've got these like claps and things. They don't have any low cut on them at the moment. Or the snaps.
That don't have any prominence, really low down in below
Yeah.
200 or something.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
Are you going to go over some of those effects too? I heard like an awesome sweep in the beginning.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Whenever you get to it, I just want to see if you were going to do that.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I like my my PC. I use a PC to make my music, and some of the synths I use are not available on Mac, and so some of the sounds I just had to like bounce down to audio. But I'll try to explain as best I can how I made them. It's not too many though. I tried to use a lot of the Ableton built-in stuff as much as I could, but there are just a few of my favorite synths that aren't yet available on Mac. Yeah, I mean, well, other than just obviously, panning it, there's something called the Haas effect, I think it's called, where you basically use a delay to create like a stereo delay to create a delay between the left channel and the right channel, and it creates this kind of width, and you can experiment, just like a few milliseconds, like the left channel could be delayed by say 3 milliseconds, and the right channel by 5, and just playing with those different values, you can spread things out really nicely and make them nice and wide. Yeah. That's something I do quite a lot. Yeah.
Was bouncing in the build-up. It seemed like the kick drum was bouncing left and right, left, right, left, right, left, right. Was that?
Oh yeah. That's one of the snare drums is going left and right. There's a central one, and then there's another one which is layered over it, which is going left and right. Yeah, well spotted. Anyone else? No. Okay. Right. So what we got next? We have the percussion group. So let's have a look. Okay, so the first thing I've got in the first build up here, I've got just a kind of filter beat using Ableton's auto filter. I don't know if you're familiar with this, but it's kind of like any other filter. It's got low pass, high pass, band pass, and so on. It also has you can also modulate the cutoff point. I'll have a band pass filter on it. I've got the amount up. So what's actually happening here is it modulates the left and the right separately. So I'll play the track to illustrate what I mean. So there's an amount control here, which obviously says how much it sweeps up and down the frequency spectrum. There's a rate control, which is set to 4 bars, so it's going over 4 bars. And then this phase control here basically determines the difference in phase between the left and the right channels. I'm not actually getting stereo where I'm sitting. I think that speaker isn't working, but I don't know if you can hear that there's a difference in the sweeping between the left and the right channel. And that was just I just used a sample, just one of the Vengeance samples there. I don't use samples for kind of like the main elements of my tracks, but I sometimes use it for kind of like supporting elements. Okay, what else have we got? So I've got a track for some drum fills. A few little things like this. Which and some other yeah, so I'll show you how I did this. You can hear like on that little hit there, it kind of purrs almost. That's using just basically time stretching. I got a loop, and this hit here, I've stretched out to be twice the length that it was in the original loop. So the original loop was something like this. Just stretched it out. Just kind of suspends it, for a little bit longer and gives it a kind of graininess. Yeah, I thought it sounded quite good. I got some other drum fills. So for these, I was just getting basically percussion loops and using Ableton's warping here, which lets you basically get a handle on each of the transient points in the loop and then move them to wherever you want and stretch them and make them as long as you want. There's a really cool feature, actually, which I'll show you. If you're into Ableton, or if you're not, this might inspire you to get into it. It's pretty cool. I'm going to just move this along. I'll move these out of the way. I'll take this big one here. And I'm going to stretch it out really far. This little thing here, where it says beats, and then it says preserve transients. You can, unfortunately, it doesn't do triplets, but it does do, the other straight divisions. But basically, it time stretches the track, but it preserves the transients rhythmically. So if you imagine for the moment, I'm not making a triplet tune. Doesn't sound too good, but let's try this. So this changes the envelope amount. If I take this down, it's perhaps not the best sample to demonstrate this with, but I'll show you it with another sample. It's really cool. It'll stretch it rhythmically, which can, if you're doing it with like synth noises or vocals, things like that, it's a really cool effect. So let me just undo what I did there. And I have some bigger drum fills here, which this is just sampled from like a classic sort of 70s funk track. But I've kind of, again, I've gotten a handle on all the transients and just kind of moved them around to, the original track that it was sampled from wasn't in triplets, but I was able to, get it into triplets quite easily just by dragging them and setting the grid on Ableton to 8th triplets. Yeah, just dragging it where I want them to go. A bit of reverb on the end there. Okay. The next thing I have in here is this was kind of I've got here. It's called combed noise. It's just in audio at the moment, but basically it's just white noise hits going through a comb filter to give it some texture. So. Again, it's quite subtle in the mix, but and I've got another thing here, which is just a little noise sweep. But I have it going through an EQ, which is shaped to produce kind of an A vowel, like an ah. It's quite subtle, but it pushes things along quite nicely. If I take the EQ off, that's how it sounds normally. Yeah. So, I mean, you'll notice like a lot of what I've got here is actually like really kind of like small sounds, and that's just kind of the way I like to work, just kind of like getting lots of little bits and getting them kind of sounding good on their own, and then like filling the gaps in one track with another track, and then just seeing how they all start to like bounce off each other. So this track here is kind of like glitchy percussion. I basically got again just a kind of like rhythmic loop, and then I started like slicing it up into its components and like stretching them and like placing them in the grid in different places. So if I just solo this, it starts to get a bit more interesting. So, I mean, on its own, it doesn't sound great, but it's really rhythmical with everything else. Yeah. Um, so yeah, really, kind of like microbeat style, the time stretching and like looping gives it that kind of buzzy texture, and I'm just kind of using it to emphasize certain hits and certain spaces in the groove. So, okay, moving on. I've got this another track here which I've called Bit Hits. Again, this is kind of like a microbeat kind of style. It's panning. You can see I've pulled down the highs and the lows on this one. And it's actually transposed up by 18 semitones from the original sample. So if I, I'll let you hear. If I take the EQ off and take it back down to 0. That was the original sound. Back up to 18, the EQ on. And also, at this point in the drop, I've got some reverb automation. So this little box here is like how much I'm sending to this reverb here. So I've turned it all the way up full for the first hit, and because it's right on a drop, it's just giving it a little to push it along. Okay. I've also got some ride cymbals, which I've used in the intro and in some of the, in the middle of the track. So basically, I got a whole bunch of ride cymbal samples here, which were from the battery kits. It's just basically all the cymbals, all the ride cymbals from the battery kits. I've got it going through a ping pong delay, just to give it a bit of spatial. Turn that off. Just gives it a bit of space. I've cut all the lows out of it. I've also got it going through a multi-band compressor, which if I take that off, see that's made quite a difference. So essentially I'm boosting I'm compressing the top layer of frequencies here, so everything above 2.5 kilohertz, and I've kind of taken down some of the mids. And I'll show you this little tool here. It's really cool. It's relatively cheap plugin. I think it's only about $40 or something. It's called LFO Tool, and it basically lets you draw in any kind of shape LFO curve you can imagine, and then you can assign it to frequency cutoff. It's got its own filter built in here: a low pass, a band pass, and a high pass. You can assign it to the resonance. You can assign it to the volume or the pan, and I think one way to when you're making music, kind of like the way I am, you're not playing the instruments. I'm not classically trained or anything, but I like to try and get that kind of human feel into things if I can. And so what I've done here is I've drawn in this volume envelope, and using this little setting here, excuse me, pulse width modulation. If you watch how the LFO plays and listen, you'll see it has a kind of whipping effect. It gets faster as it gets towards the end of the wave. Giving it a kind of, if I take it right down, there's that kind of like whipping motion towards the end. So the blue shadow that you see there is actually the what's happening after the pulse width. If I bring this down again, you can see how the shape kind of changes. And you can mess with like the phase and the timing of all this. I've got so this is like a 1 bar kind of loop length here, yeah, it gives it, it kind of sounds a little bit like a real drummer, just easing off in the middle there. I like to use that a lot, those kind of subtle volume envelopes. Really helps to give, movement and breath to things. Okay, I got some bongos. Again, I was just using samples and just getting them into the triplet time grid. I've cut the highs and the lows out of the bongos, get them to sit in the mix. And I'm using a gate here because there's actually quite a lot of noise in the background of this loop. It's like, I don't know, it's like people talking and stuff, So I put the gate on, and it's just kind of got the noise out of there. Cool. This other sound I made in a synth which is PC only. It's called Diversion. It's one of my favorite synths. Really, really cool. Very powerful. I wish I could show you around it, but I can't get on my laptop at this stage. But yeah, I made this sound using just saw waves. And one of the things I like about Diversion is that for each of the oscillators, there are a whole bunch of parameters that you can modulate, which change the shape of the waveform. So without even touching filters or effects, you're able to very quickly and precisely change the shape of the waveform, and it produces some nice effects. So it's quite a cool sound. Yeah. So I've just kind of called that kind of croquet percussion, and yeah, I just have a bit of compression on that just to bring it out in the mix a bit more. This next one here, I can show you this thing here, this beat repeat street. I'll show you how I made this, but basically this is just again kind of like a nice kind of like micro beat thing. And it's actually changing all the time because of this little thing here, and I'll show you how I made that. But we don't even mind if we just take a 5-minute break just for the toilet. Yeah. Been drinking rather a lot of water. All right, thank you, everyone. So can do that here. You can't really do that during a DJ set. Just kind of stop the music and say you're going to the toilet. But okay. Right. So yeah, I've got this little custom instrument that I made, which I've got on this glitch bits thing, which is pretty cool for introducing a bit of randomness, keep things changing. I've called it beat repeat street. I mean, are many people familiar with Ableton's beat repeat plugin? No? No one? Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, basically what I've done here is Ableton has this cool rack feature where you can get a whole load of plugins, chain them together, and then you can take different parameters from each of those plugins and assign them to one or more of these 8 macro controls. So like, let's start. So yeah, so one of the controls I've got here is low cut. That basically just controls this cutoff point in the EQ. So I can, I've got this saved, so I can put this onto any track I want, and I can cut the lows out of it straight away. So the next effect I have in the chain is erosion, which introduces kind of white noise at a particular frequency. So you can see here I've got erosion amount and erosion frequency. So if I just solo that. The best sound to hear that on, but it just adds a bit of dirt and a bit of kind of grittiness to the sound. The next effect I've got on here is Ableton's simple delay, which is as it says on the tin, as is the simple delay. There's no filtering or anything. And I have this assigned to let's see. Yeah, I have this assigned to this here, which I've called drops. So if I turn this up, sounds like insects having a party or something. Yeah. So that's basically that single knob is controlling the feedback of the delay, the dry-wet amount of the delay, and the time of the delay. So when the knob's at 0, the delay time is at 1 millisecond, and the dry-wet's all the way dry, so you're not hearing it at all. And you watch as I turn it up. And this the simple delay actually has 3 modes. If you right-click on the top here, you got this repitch, fade, and jump. It's set to repitch mode, which is why you're hearing the pitches of the delayed notes changing. If I set it to fade, for example, it would sound a bit different. And if I set it to jump, it would sound different again. I like the repitch. So yeah, really good for textures and stuff. So the next effect I have in the chain is a saturator. And basically, I've just, that's just for kind of fattening things up. I don't really need it for this sound, but it's good for kind of just getting some saturation in there. Yeah, but then the real kind of like magic of this is I've got this beat repeat plugin. I've actually got 5 of them, and like what beat repeat does is it allows you to select a particular point in a bar that it will sample the sound that comes in at that point and then loop it. So on this first beat repeat, I've got the offset set to 0, and that yellow line you can see is like right at the start of the pattern. And then you have a gate which says how long it's going to loop for after it samples it. So, and this other thing here, this grid point, this is how big the loop length is going to be. So I've used one here at the start, and then I've got another one which then triggers after that one, and another one here which triggers after that one, and then another one here which triggers after that one. But this one has actually got an envelope on it, so it's actually decaying. And then finally, I've got another one here with an envelope on it. You see, they all have different grid sizes. Like this is, but because I'm in a triplet time signature, these are all multiples of 3. So this is like a 12. This is like a 96. There's another one with a 12, 24, and 6. So if this, if this is going over your head and you want me to explain, just, please just shout. So the controls I have these two macro controls control the chance parameter and the interval parameter of all those beat repeats. So the chance parameter is basically the random factor. When it's set to 100%, it will grab and loop it every single time. So if I put it up to 100 and play it, maybe I should play it without it first. So if I turn down to 0. And then as I start to introduce the chance, it will pick up samples from different points in the loop and then repeat them for maybe say 2/16ths. Yeah, well, I think you get the idea. Basically, it helps to introduce an element of randomness, and I find this like really handy, particularly in the early stages of a track. When there's a tendency to get like stuck in a loop. It's one of the things. The most common complaints of like amateur producers and so on is that they just get kind of like stuck in a loop, and it's like 1 minute is like the best sounding thing they've ever heard, and then like 3 hours later they hate it. And a good way to keep it's because it's not changing. A loop. I mean, there may be things changing within the loop, but then the more you listen to it, the more kind of stagnant it becomes, and that kind of affects your creativity. So I can throw this onto any kind of sound. It might be cool to try it on something else that's a bit more obvious. Those kind of like micro beat sounds are, let's say it's a bit hard to notice what it's actually doing. If I can just copy that, let's take a sound like this intro sound here, and I'll paste. And yeah, there we go. Okay, so this should demonstrate it a bit better. So I'll turn it off. Okay, so that's just a 1-bar loop. And I'm going to turn this on. I'll turn the chance down to 0. I'm going to turn the erosion off. Okay, so it still shouldn't be doing anything. And then I'll gradually turn up the chance, and you'll start to see random looping elements coming into it. Yeah, so very easy to just create like whole kind of different patterns using this. So yeah, and finally the other thing I have here that I haven't talked about yet, I've called freeze delay. That's triggering basically a filter. So as I turn the knob up, this filter will switch on. It's switched off when the knob is at 0. But it'll switch on and it'll start sweeping up in a kind of high pass filter as a high pass filter, and it will control both the cutoff and the resonance of that filter. So it gets really kind of peaky as it goes up. Like I can't show it just now, but it's also going to a ping pong delay. and it's turning up the feedback of a ping pong delay and the dry wet of a ping pong delay. And this little F button here, this is freeze. That's freeze. So at any point you can press that, and the delay will actually just freeze and repeat. So if I go back here and I play this, and I'll show you. This is actually a really powerful effect, and it's really simple, and it's a great way to, if you've not used macro knobs before, this is a great way to start. Is to get one knob which controls a high pass filter and a delay at the same time. It's really powerful. So that's the freeze. Yeah. Right at the top of the knob, I've got it freezing. It's pretty cool. This button here, map mode, this basically, this is all the different knobs in this beat repeat street and what they're affecting. And you can determine like the minimum and maximum value of each of the parameters that it's affecting. So for example, in the freeze delay there, you can see the actual, this one here, the freeze parameter, that only switches on when I get to 121, which is like right up there, and it's very easy. It's very easy just to set the map mode and set the ranges, and you can get these kind of like one knob effects, which are like really powerful. Okay, so where are we? And we're going through the percussion. Yeah, so the glitch bits thing again. This was like some kind of like percussive loop that I got from a sample library. I mean, I should mention I also make sample CDs for a company called Sample Magic. Actually, that was one of the things that allowed me to make the transition from working in a proper job to becoming music full time, because it's a really good source of income, and it also helped me to kind of hone my skills because I was making sample packs for lots of different genres of music, so it would afford me the chance to learn the different techniques that are used in different genres of music, and put together a product, using those techniques. And yeah, if it's something, it's something good to supplement your income. If you are a producer, you'll probably, if you want to do it, you'll probably find an opportunity somewhere, someone who'll, pay you to make some samples. It's good fun. It helps you build up your own sample library, because not only are you obviously keeping the sample packs you've made, obviously, but you can also save any kind of patches and things that you make on the way, in between, so you can build up like a really good library. This, I think a lot of times when you sit down in front of the computer, there's a real pressure to make a track. But when you're just working on sounds with no expectation of how it's going to have to fit into a track, or no pressure to actually finish a track, but you're just sitting down for a whole day making loops and making patches, that's something I think a lot of people don't actually take the time to do, but it's well worth it. And if you can get paid to do it, even better. Yeah, I mean, as I say, I just made that, and I've got more back on my home computer. Some other, actually, I might have one here. Yeah, there's a few other ones here. Hedflux filter box. I can't actually remember when I last used that, but let's open it up and see what it does. Okay. Yeah, so this is just something to give me. This is quite an old one I made. As I say, I don't use my laptop for producing music that often, but yeah, I think I made this just to give me some nice kind of tonal control over sounds. Um, inside it, I've got, yeah, that's not a very big one. I've just got basically a low pass and a high pass. I've got resonance control on both of them. I've got an EQ and an erosion, just to give me some grit on it. But I mean, the possibilities are kind of like endless with this. I mean, not only can you actually make a chain of effects as long as you want, but you can actually make as many chains as you want. So you can have like all these like parallel chains of effects. I mean, and you can actually embed racks within racks. So, I can, if I right click here and I go group, then it will put the rack I've just created in another rack. So I've got then a whole set of macro knobs here, and you can nest it infinitely. As much as your computer can handle, really. And you don't have to just use Ableton effects. I mean, you could have like waves effects in here, or whatever whatever plugins you want, you can put in there. And this is really one of the most powerful features of Ableton, which I don't know if other. I mean, I think Reason's got something called the Combinator, which does a similar kind of thing like this. You can just like nest as many instruments and things as you want in there. I don't know about Logic and Cubase. I mean, I'm sure they have something similar, but really good for sound design and also for like live performance as well. Yeah, I should say by the way that I'm not doing live performance at the moment. It's something I've kind of wanted to do, but I was a DJ before I was a producer, and I do love to DJ. And even though I play most of my sets, I play kind of like most of my own stuff. There's like a few other artists whose sound I like to represent. But when I sit down in the studio, like I want to make new music. I can't be bothered going back through all my old tracks and like cutting them up and everything. I don't know. It's just something hasn't really appealed to me. However, on saying that, for the last year or so, every time I finish a track, as I say, I've got these these groups, and usually I'll have usually about 5 or 6 groups. So sometimes we have 2 different synth groups. Basically, I will bounce down each of these groups individually. So I have them like as stems. So I'll have like just the drums of the track, just the percussion, just the bass, and then it's very easy within Ableton to cut those up and put them into the session view, which I'm sure a lot of you have seen before. This is very commonly used for like live performance. You can fill this with clips, and you can like trigger the clips with your controllers and affect each of the different stems of your track individually. And when I do get a live set together, that's how I will do it, and that's how I always make a point of like bouncing down those stems at the end of a project. It's actually a really good thing to do for a mix down as well, um, when you get to like this stage in a track. I mean, when I get home, this is what I'll do with this track. Um, you know, to actually kind of like work on the mix down, particularly when you're getting to like towards like the kind of emotional peak of the track and stuff. It can be pretty hard when you've got you know, all these elements all over the place, and Ableton, as much as I love it, it doesn't have much screen space and it doesn't support multi monitors. So you're kind of like getting around in all these tracks and doing the levels and everything. It can be a bit of a pain in the arse. So I'll bounce down the 5 stems, and then I'll just open a new project and drop in those 5 wave files, and then you've got like a nice clean project with just 5 wave files. You can still, all your sounds are still in there. You're working with audio, you can cut those wave files, you can reverse them. There's lots and lots of creative possibilities, as well as being like really easy to do the mix down, because you're only mixing with 5 tracks. And yeah, I'll always do that at the end of my tracks now, and eh, it's just when you've got all this and you just close it and you open up and you just got 5 tracks to work with. It's just like You know, it's just a load off. Um, yeah.
So, oh, thanks. I'm a Logic guy, so everything you're doing, I'm trying to like kind of transfer in my head and how I
Yeah.
would do it in Logic. But when you say grouping, is that bussing?
I think so. Yeah, I think that's what it's called in
Okay,
Logic.
is that bussing in Ableton? Okay, so basically you're just doing it. Okay, percussion, one bus,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So yeah, I mean, I guess if you haven't already, I guess if you could go deeper into more why you would do one thing one way or why you would bus something, you know, whatever your bussing techniques may be.
Yeah. Um, well, I mean, the groups, you know, I mean, I guess they're just chosen, as just sound groups, really. You know, unfortunately, with Ableton, you can't do groups within groups, which I'd like if they could do that in the next version. Um, but you know, like I say, I mean, they're very broad. You know, these groups are very broad. You know, just drums, percussion, bass, synth, um, and pad. You know, for this track, and that's just, you know, I guess that's just the way I've always kind of done it. You know, um, but you know, once they're grouped together, I can then, you know, send effects to, you know, to the buses. I can like process each of the buses. So, for example, I think on the bass bus, I've got some sidechain compressing. So, excuse me. Yeah, so I've got like all these different bass lines, all these different bass sounds. They're all going to the same bus, and then I'm sidechaining the bus. You know, so that's one way of using it. But you know, with the others, you know, it's really just to keep things tidy. Some of the other ones, it just kind of keeps things tidy. And of course, when it comes to the mix down as well, then, you know, and as I say, I'm bouncing these into tracks and putting them into another project. Then everything's kind of grouped logically, and it just kind of makes sense. Okay, so time is moving on, and I've not even got to the bass line yet. So. Or the synths or anything. So yeah, I mean, in the rest of the percussion group, basically, I've got some like air, you know, like sweeping white noise. Um, that's about it really. I got some sweeping white noise, some reverse cymbals and things like that. You know, nothing too fancy. Okay. So right onto the bass. So I've used. I don't always make multi-part bass lines. You know, sometimes I just have one bass synth, and if it's like well made enough and the pattern is right, it can just be like really groovy, and I've literally just got one track for my bass. But for this one, you know, I wanted to make something a bit more kind of, you know, like sort of like multi-part bass line style. So um, let's have a listen to it soloed. Okay, so the bass line I started with was this one here that I've called stab bass. It's in MIDI. Just, you know, root note, eighth triplets. I've got something here which I call a bass dive, which is just something that kind of goes boo at the end of the bar there. Boo. You heard that there. Which just kind of leads nicely into the next drop. And I've got one here which I've called liquid bass, which I made in a synth called Alchemy, which I could highly recommend. It's really good synth. I've also recorded it into audio, which is what that second liquid bass track is. Oops. You know, I'm not actually using that last part of the bass, but I was just using it for. Yeah, I mean, I've got I mean, Alchemy is kind of a beast. I don't want to go into it really that much, but it's got a large amount of oscillators. You could this NOS parameter, you can really, really thicken up sounds and get like really lush textures. It's got masses of filter types. It's got LFOs, HDSR envelopes. It's got multi-segment envelopes, which is what I'm using in this case. So if I turn that down, for example, then it won't make that weird noise at the end. As I said before, I really like these kind of like whippy envelope curves. So yeah, this is a great synth. Check it out if you can. That's what I used to make this. So. Okay. Okay, so I got another little one here, which unfortunately is in audio, but it was quite simple to make. I'll explain how I made it. Where are we? It's really just, I've used a few different oscillators with saw waves, all going into a low-pass filter. And then I have the low-pass filter opening up, which is obviously producing the overall shape of it. And as well as having the low-pass filter opening up, I've also got it going to a 12th note LFO, like a triplet LFO, so it's kind of wobbling, going wah, 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 wah. That's doing the volume, I think. Yeah, and it just helps it sit in the groove a bit nicely. Just that little bit of modulation on it. Let's look at the waveform here. Yeah, so you can see. Yeah, so there's volume automation happening in the triplet time signature as the filter's opening up. And I've also used the Haas effect that I talked about earlier here. So this filter delay plugin has a left channel delay, a right channel delay, and a center delay, which I've got turned off. I have a delay of 16 milliseconds on the left channel and a delay of 6 milliseconds on the right channel. I've got the feedback turned all the way down, so it's only triggering once. And if I turn that off, you hear the difference. So, whoops, just solo that. I put it on. Yeah, can everyone hear the difference of that? It's kind of like much wider. I can hear it quite well here. It just helps bring the bass out from the other bass sounds that are in there. Like the ones that we've talked about so far. Well, the first couple, the main kind of bass sounds that are like pure down the middle, kind of mono. The liquid bass thing here that I was talking about, that's actually panning. It's got like LFO panning on it. You can see it's the left and the right channel is kind of different there. And yeah, and so this one is like nice and wide. It's kind of when you're doing these kind of multi-part bass lines, the key is obviously to get you want I kind of want it all to be a bass, but I want each to be distinct in its own way. So I'm trying to create that that contrast between each of the different each of the different bass sounds. And yeah, using like these width techniques and so on is a good way to do that. Okay, I have another bass here which is still in MIDI, and I can show you how I made it. Let's have a listen. Okay, so this is Ableton's operator synth. It's I had this for years and never really used it, and I must confess it was because I just kind of looked at the interface and thought, wow, that looks a bit shit. But actually, it's really good. Looks can be deceiving, shall we say? Obviously it comes built in with Ableton, and it's just looks like everything else in Ableton. but you know, it's actually a really powerful synth. It's an FM synthesizer, meaning you can use. There's 4 oscillators on the left here, and you can use these to modulate the frequencies of other oscillators and so on. And in fact, that's what I'm doing here. So I'll talk you through this quickly. I don't know if you know much about FM synthesis, but you know, it's pretty easy to demonstrate it with this synth.